The luxury Swiss watch world is a small one. Everybody knows everybody in the industry, and that results in brands often being inspired by one another for a lot of things. It's usually no coincidence that pink dials seem to be popping up at multiple brands at the same time. Sometimes these things just turn into outright cliches, actions and ideas that are so tired that I feel we can have a little bit of fun with calling them out. Now, not all cliches are necessarily bad, but they are still cliches, and here are some of the cliches that I personally find the most egregious in the watch world. Let's dive in. What did Tudor release this year? They released the new Burgundy Black Bay with a Metas movement. Do you know what they'll release next year? The blue dial. A little over a year ago, IWC released the Ingenieur with a white dial, a greenish dial, and a titanium version. What did they release a year later? The blue dial. There's no entry-level blue dial Land Dweller this year. Blue dials are by far the most common color to receive this treatment. A new watch gets released, and in the first year or so, you can only get it in less popular colors. The brands do this to drum up hype and pull in customers that want to be the first movers. They also capitalize on people not being willing to wait. And I suppose in some hypothetical scenario, some people might end up buying the blue as well later on. Now, there's a reasoning for the brands to do this. Blue is always going to be among the most popular selling colors. Having more noticeable and different colors out initially draws attention to the new product and seeks to build anticipation for those people that just want the blue dial. But it's still a cliche. How do you take a watch and make it badass and sporty? You know, you've just signed your deal with a Formula One team or a cycling team or a high-performance sailing team. What do? Well, you do what Tudor do. You make a carbon Alinghi with some dashes of color, or you do what Breitling did, and you made a carbon Breitling Endurance Triathlon edition with dashes of color. If you Panerai, you do a carbon or a ceramic edition with dashes of color. A lot of these watches look cool. Carbon and ceramic often works really well. It does make a watch look more badass, but it's just so unbelievably cliche. It's simple, it's a logical thing to do, but often it just doesn't come across as particularly original or interesting simply because the base template of black or carbon or ceramic is so overused. On occasion, some brands manage to do something a little bit more special. I'm partial to something like the Zenith Defy Fuse Alp, which just because it's white, it's thematically consistent, but simply because it's not black, it's just so much more interesting. The same goes for something like an IWC Tahoe or Woodlands or Mojave. You know, watches that admittedly aren't brand collabs, but they leverage military and air force and flight in a much more interesting and original way than just making it black and giving it a splash of color. One thing that might be a cliche is asking people to leave a like and a subscribe on the video. The truth is, a like, a subscribe, or both tell YouTube that you think this was a good video. That's information I can use to improve my content. So if you're enjoying this video, leave a like, a subscribe, or both. Thanks. We've all got our missions in life, and I think I might have found mine. It's to eradicate Pepto-Bismol pink as a trend color. I've got no problem with pink watches when it's done well. I like a Grand Seiko Shunbun, and I can at least appreciate the Zenith Chronomaster in pink that was made to support, I think, cancer research. But every couple of years or so, a brand pulls out a color. Right now it's pink to make their watches relevant to primarily women. And this is from the Swatch Mission to the Pink, to the Oris Miss Piggy, to the Pink Bremont. It's just lazy. And I swear there must be a group of designers banging their heads on the table when the product managers come to them and say, research shows that we can attract women by making a pink dial. Could you do that for us? Like I said, there's nothing wrong with pink, but it's the cliche of how it's applied. And while we're at it, Tiffany blue is in there as well. I get it. Formula One is about fast cars and beautiful women. It's expensive, it's high tech, it's got a huge global audience, but this obsession with watches with Formula One is mad, I tell you, mad. The number of brands that feel the need to have their logo on the side of some Formula One racer feels longer than the Morgan Stanley Watch Report. Tag, Richard Mille, or IWC, Moser. I'm not questioning necessarily that this is likely effective to some extent. I mean, there's always something about branding that has an element of, we don't quite know what the effect of this is, but our gut tells us it works. And for some brands, it's almost like one of those things you have to do to get talked about. But when you know that it's just a question of money and everybody is doing it, it just loses some of its effect. So I do love the AD experience. I like the fact that if I'm spending the kind of money I'm spending, I expect to have a good experience. But the whole champagne thing is just super cliche. Also because even up to Patek, it's often not a particularly good champagne. And I know I get a little bit picky about this, but often the ADs don't store their champagnes correctly, and it just makes for a little bit of an underwhelming experience. I'm sure some people love the feeling, but it just feels cheesy to me that you sit there with your significant other and sip on lukewarm bubbles of a bottle of $50 champagne from a bottle that has been recorked to celebrate a $25,000 or $50,000 watch purchase. I feel like I have to say this again and again for fear of being misunderstood. A good skeleton dial is a sight to behold. I can think of a couple of AP open work models that I would love to own, but skeletonization is one of the things that smaller, less established brands have a tendency to do when they want to prove that they have watchmaking credentials or skills. I've got a Formex review of a watch I really like, the Formex Essence Ceramica. It's an incredible watch, and to me it proves that Formex punch way above their weight when it comes to manufacturing skill. The skeleton dial itself, in the particular watch I'm talking about, is one of the better ones, but it's still cliche and overdone. I would hold off and get this watch as soon as they have a regular dial, maybe with a meteorite or just a flat sunray black, or the blue, which always comes 1 year later. Zelos have done this skeletonization thing, Christopher Ward do this regularly. The examples are numerous. Some are good, some are bad, but no matter what, it's always a cliche way of showing the world that you're more than a brand that just assembles watches. Some people might feel this is a little bit controversial, but the bog standard Sellita SW200 in a transparent case back with a custom rotor is a massive cliche. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Sellita SW200, but custom rotors on standard movements is super cliche. Transparent case backs are great when you can look at the full back of an IWC perpetual calendar where the glass is from edge to edge. Seeing the movement of the Chopard Quattro is worth every penny. But even when I get to Omega and the standard Metas movement in a Seamaster 300M, I could probably do without it if it led to a thinner watch. But display casebacks and custom rotors are a way to pump up the price a little bit, and also a way to manipulate the cost structure so you can get over the 60% Swiss-made threshold. It doesn't, like I said, have to necessarily be the Sellita SW200, but when you've seen it so many times and similar movements like that so many times, it's just not a particularly interesting movement to look at. And there's just not a whole lot to see. And it's just adding price for not a lot of extra value. I debated with myself whether or not this was a cliche, but I do think it is. And it's the Western Chinese New Year watch. Brands obviously want to get a foothold in the Chinese market. Chinese New Year is a big thing, and wealthy Chinese individuals are known to spend money on luxury items to commemorate their birth years. So, Year of the Dragon or the Rat or the Snake or whatever. This makes sense, and some of the watches are really cool, but the commercialization of the tradition just seems like a lazy, cliched attempt. Brands that actually make full collections for the Chinese market are far more convincing to me personally than these one-off creations. How do you convey that you're a playful, fun-loving brand? Snoopy on your Timex, Snoopy on your Speedy, Kermit on your Oris, Mickey Mouse on your Genta? Could I interest you in an Audemars Piguet Spider-Man or a Street Fighter Seiko? I'll be the first to admit that I'd like a Snoopy Mission to the Moon Speedy. These watches can be fun, but again, it's how they're one of these tactics that a lot of brands default to convey fun and playfulness and a chill attitude. The end result is not necessarily wrong. Some of them are pretty good. I wouldn't do without a lot of them, because they're cool, but they are cliches or tropes. They like the sky beams that destroyed cities in all movies from the mid-90s all the way to, the 2020s. They work, but it's super, super overdone. So I probably bashed the brands enough, in fun, of course. I think, though, it's time for a little bit of introspection. The last cliche is the steering wheel wrist shot. The one, look at me, I have a Porsche and a Rolex GMT. No, wait, I have an Audi and an Omega Seamaster. I think essentially we should be making rules for these shots. If you want a wrist shot of your pilot's watch, you have to be in a plane. You have to be in the pilot seat, and you have to initially have the enemy on your 6. When he pulls from the clouds, you move in above him and you give him the bird. That's when you take the shot. If you're in a car, I expect your car to be a Trabant and the watch to be a Sin 556. That's the only combination that will be approved. And if you're diving, I expect you to prove that you are precisely at the maximum depth rating of your watch. If you aren't, it doesn't count, and I won't believe that your watch can actually go that deep. Okay, maybe not the last one. You'll probably be dead if you do that. But you get my point. Let's try something that's not so cliche. But that's it. Those were some of the things I think are incredibly cliche. They're not bad per se, and they make sense from a brand perspective, and also the wrist shots can be fun. For the brands, these cliches are there to address an audience and drum up some interest and to showcase ideas and skills, but it doesn't change the fact that they are often repetitive and seen before. What are your watch brand cliches? And more importantly, do you have examples of who has pulled off a cliche in a way that was different, unusual, or creative? Something you hadn't seen in quite the same way or done in the same way before. Share in the comments, like, subscribe. Cheers.